Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 p.m. on a Thursday instead of 7 p.m., which means this is a creative conversation, one of the two sub-brands of Every Day is a Story All Its Own. I'm your host, Joey Medea, storyteller and creative. And today, for episode number 49, I title it Sharp Swords, Magnificent Magic, and Dragons Taking Flight, Writing Fantasy 101. So I'm going to take you through the bones of the genre, talk a little bit about, I've written two fantasy novels, Jester Knight and Aldemir's Dilemma. I cannot show you Aldemir's Dilemma, even my personal copy. I guess we sold it recently at some point, and I haven't had a chance to get some new ones, but I put together a little bit of a slide show to show you some things today. So we're going to roll the opening real quick, and then we'll get right to it. But welcome to Sharp Swords, Magnificent Magic, and Dragons Taking Flight. All right, so let's get right into it. So this is genre. Next week, I'm going to have R.H. Yoho on, who is a Western writer, and we're going to talk about the tropes of the Western genre. I'm going to be wearing my shirt next week that says, you say trope like it's a bad thing. I love tropes. They are our familiarity. They are our entrance point into genre. And I'm going to talk about that today. So genre comes as a double-edged sword. Okay, we'll just take the pun. I'm not even going to pardon it. It's a double-edged sword because it's so familiar. Some of the names I'm going to share with you, if you're a fan of fantasy, you know some of the greatest writers in history have written fantasy, the scope of it, the complexity. You really kind of have to know what you're doing to do it well. I've come across a lot of stuff that isn't done well. I try to do mine well as best I can. It takes me about 10 years to write one of the fantasy novels. So I don't know that I'm probably not going to get to all 7 in what I call the Amber Dragon Tales. But here's the setup. Here's the type, the genre at its core as I see it for fantasy. A protagonist, often a simple, unassuming person, at least somewhat content in their everyday life, in their ordinary world, is given a quest, a call to adventure to which they have to answer yes. A journey must be made, physical and psychological. The best fantasy is so psychological. I love Western because it has a heavy overlay of religious metaphor. Fantasy has religious metaphor. It has all kinds of metaphor. It's a great opportunity for world building, which I'm going to talk about today as well. So a journey must be made, physical and psychological, crossing the threshold, moving from the ordinary to the non-ordinary world, leaving the familiar, the ordinary world. They cross the threshold into a new and dangerous world where they will be repeatedly tested. Allies and enemies abound in these worlds. The stakes are the triumph of good over evil, or the survival of an entire race, an entire world, perhaps an entire universe. Again, fantasy is wonderful because I think of all the genres, it has the largest scope of all. And the big question is, which keeps us coming, if you watched my dualities, triads, and mediators a couple weeks ago, Dr. Wertheim, my writing mentor, would say, guess what? Here's what. So what? So the so what is, will they prevail because the stakes are high, and they are for us. This is a genre where it's really easy to identify with the characters, with the heroes. So of course, again, like I say, it's all full of tropes, trope after trope. The interesting thing is they match our myths, and they match the monomyth. So again, let me take you through this and listen with the lens of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, the monomyth, right? Separation, initiation, return, answering the call to adventure. A protagonist, often a simple, unassuming person, at least somewhat content in their everyday life, is given a quest. A journey must be made, physical and psychological, crossing the threshold, moving from ordinary to non-ordinary reality, leaving the familiar. They cross the threshold into a new new and dangerous world where they will be repeatedly tested. Allies and enemies abound. The stakes are triumph of good over evil and the survival of an entire race, an entire world, an entire universe. Will they prevail? That matches up so beautifully. When I wrote A Jester Knight, it was published in 2009, but I started writing it, in college. So 1998, 88, 89. I had no idea what the hero's journey, what the monomyth was. I was not introduced to that until about 2002. But when I went back and looked at the book, man, it fit, because these are our myths. These are our stories. This genre of fantasy, this is our oldest form of storytelling. It's the closest to IRL, right? As the kids say, the Gen Z say, in real life, is the Middle Ages. And it has all of those elements of our Middle Ages. So there is a familiarity there. Actually, when fantasy is done well, I would say that it is instinctually familiar, note for note, point by point, and it hits us in our gut. It's so embedded in our DNA, the campfire stories of our ancestors, are what these are, these myths. So what are some of the tropes that you would expect to see in knights in fantasy? Knights, villains, castles and dungeons, royalty, dragons and monsters, magic, quests. And those quests can be different. They could be a throne to claim, like Game of Thrones, an object to find or destroy, like the ring in Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings, or a truth to deliver. Now, as you know, I really subscribe to David Mamet's theory, 3 uses of the knife, that every story is a move from a lie to a truth. But this pursuit of a dangerous truth that then has to be delivered, this is a key component of fantasy. The History Channel's Vikings had magic and fantasy because the Viking culture had supernatural and had divination and all of those kinds of things. I'll talk a little bit more about my own personal relationship with magic in my writing a little later. But it had plenty, it had dreams and it had portents, visions of different kinds of things. Even in that more historical, it moved to fantasy to me in that realm. So who are the great writers of fantasy? J.R.R. Tolkien, Anne McCaffrey, C.S. Lewis, Marion Zimmer Bradley, George R.R. Martin, Ursula K. Le Guin. One of the first after Tolkien that I read Le Guin, many of her stories in college. Came to C.S. Lewis a little bit after that. Dan Parkinson, who I love, the Dragonlance series. I really enjoy that. And of course, J.K. Rowling sits very much heavy, leads with magic, but has all of the other mythological tropes that you would expect from fantasy, from high fantasy. One of the great things about fantasy is creating whole new worlds. You have an opportunity to do that. Horror, yeah, sometimes we're creating supernatural, paranormal worlds, illusionary things. Westerns, we want them to be familiar. They're so dependent on the landscape, on the familiarity of the Western tropes of our history, mythologized as it is, especially in the United States. And always interesting to see, and I'll talk about this next week with R.H. Yoho, about R.G. Yoho next week, just what is done when the Europeans tackle the Westerns. It's always interesting. Sergio Leone and the spaghetti Westerns and so on and so forth. So you get an opportunity with fantasy to create new worlds, new landscapes, new races, new religions, new political systems. It's very large in scope. There's lots of trilogies, and there are plenty of series that run into, as many as a couple dozen books. The story just goes on and on and on. Like I said, my own Amber Dragon Tales, ideally would be 7 books to tell that complete story, to finish out that cycle over a couple of different generations. So again, what I'm talking about here really is long form narrative. Game of Thrones and the hours and hours and hours of screen time for The Hobbit, the Lords of the Rings stories, Harry Potter, so on and so forth. It lends itself very well. And there are 10 books now in my Stanton Chronicles, and with a plan, I don't know, there could be 20 or 30. Again, time is ticking on me more and more, I feel like. Planned 7 books in the Amber Dragon Tales. So it's very, very big. So how do you keep it manageable? Well, it takes a lot of organization. I'm going to do some show and tell a little later after I really get all this set up solid for you. So it's really organization, but it's really remembering the 3-act structure. So the trilogy itself is a 3-act structure. Within each of those is the 3-act structure. I wrote Jester Knight in 3 parts, again, instinctually as I mapped it out, part 1, part 2, part 3. I already talked about Joseph Campbell's hero journey. It's just right there. As Joseph himself would say, it is all over the place. The idea of the separation, the initiation, the return. Lord of the Rings is so beautiful because we have it simultaneously. To me, Aragorn is doing a separation, initiation, return for his family, for himself, to reclaim things that were lost, that he was perhaps afraid of or was in denial of or felt he couldn't rise to. Of course, there's Frodo. Pippin and Merry have their own separation, initiation, return, which is amazing, subtle. It's funny. Yes, they're there. They give us some of the humor. Even Gandalf has his separation, initiation, return after he has his encounter with the Balrog, and he comes back and he's something completely new. So that is the beauty of Lord of the Rings. All these simultaneous heroes' journeys that are going on. Kings that have to reclaim themselves, sons that have to prove themselves. These are all themes that I love and incorporate in my work all the way around. So fantasy, again, so given to triads, so given to the 3-act structure, separation, initiation, return. It uses lots of triads. It incorporates some form, oftentimes, of the triple goddess of the maiden, mother, and crone. We see that in Lord of the Rings. We definitely see it in Game of Thrones. We have rites of passage. So for instance, you start as a page, you become a squire, then you become a knight. So that's very central to my own fantasy series. And then you have a hierarchy. You have the commoners, you have the nobles, and you have the gods. And you have mediators through all of those different kinds of things. Fantasy is full of these great mediations. Another reason why I love it so much. So fantasy too, how to keep it manageable. When it gets so fantastical, when it has dragons and all of these things, how do you keep it grounded? How do you keep it real and accessible for the audience? And that means details. So things like family crests and personal quests of knights. So here's my lead character, Aldemir. This is his shield. That symbol there on the right and left, which may look a little odd, that's what's called the Klosmer of the Jester Knight, and it's the combination of the work of the Jester and the work of the Knight. I'll talk about that a little later. Other shields here that I have and crests, so I do a lot of that detail work. This is a place where I can use my love of art and my expression of art to do these kinds of things. Maps, so let me pull up, and for my friends who are listening to this just radio, audio only, of course, you can check this out on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, wherever you would like to. So anyway, here's the cover of the second book, which I don't have any copies here in the house, Aldemir's Dilemma, book 2 of the Amber Dragon Tales. I'm going to come out hopefully next year, probably the second half of next year. I'm going to come out with a different cover to celebrate a new edition, a new release of Jester Knight. So there's another of that. This is my research. I'm going to hold on to that for now and all the books that I love and things like that. So another thing that you can do is maps. So this is a map. The original map I still have, and I tried to be organized here. Here's the original map. This is from like probably about 20 years ago. I'm going to have to do a little dance here between these between these things here. But here's the original map, kind of weathered, been taped together, added to as the story has gone on. I've added color at times as I was studying it. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. Let me bring this back up here. Maps, layouts. I had my daughter Jo do these for me, and they are in the second book. They're in Aldemir's Dilemma, but this is the main castle. This is called the Temple of the Seers. So this really expresses some of the religious element in all of the different books. That's in the main kingdom. And then something called the Vessel of the Runai, which they are seagoing people. I love the Vikings. I love, as you know, I play a pirate. I love all things nautical and maritime. So there's a major race introduced only a tiny bit in the first book. And I'll talk about unfolding and broadening out your world as I go with this presentation today. But there's a Vessel of the Runai, which looks somewhat like a Viking ship in many ways. So I wanted to show you all of that stuff. I'll go back to that bookshelf thing a little later. Genealogies. So I have all kinds of timelines and genealogies and family. I mean, it's just stacks and stacks and stacks of them. When people are born, who's who beget who, what families are this. So again, and then this is I call this my compendium of characters, places, and things for this, and it's just page after page, all of the characters, all of the places, names of animals, the foreign languages that I make up. I have my own language for the elves that I have made up. This I will save till later. So it's a lot about all of these details, knowing a lot. I talk a lot in these presentations and in my writing classes about the fact that you need to know a lot more about your world, about your characters, and then you never know where it will take you when you have all this detailed information. Then you can plant little things. George R.R. Martin is great about that. You think a character is a throwaway and they wind up being central in another book or two. And that takes plotting. It takes planning. It takes research. I have, just for this series of books, I have these 4 binders all full of research. And some of it is, I think this one is, just pictures I've collected. So when I want to write about a certain landscape, I have a book about all those kinds of things, all kinds of notes. I'll save this for a little later, but I wanted to show you that. This way I'll get them out of the way. But that's just for this series, those 4 notebooks. And they're always growing. They're always getting bigger. Okay, so another thing that you can do, really should do, and I've done it since I was very young, is read the best, watch the best. So this is in my office here, back behind me. I couldn't get it in camera because of the angle, but this is all the books that I've read. This is research books. This is fantasy books, nonfiction books, DVDs, VHSs, all different kinds of things. The very first fantasy that I ever got was J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. This is that book when I was in middle school. It's one of the first books, the first book that I ever bought with my own money, and I bought it from Scholastic, and I still have it. So I wanted to show you that. So learn, deconstruct, watch this stuff, pull out the tropes, watch the hero's journey as it unfolds. It's value added when you engage with the stuff. I love to do it. I can be a pain in the ass to watch stuff with, because I'm constantly working and I'm constantly noticing things, mise en scene, and how shots are tracked and different kinds of things like that. But anyway, it's what we do and we love it, so we do it. The secret to fantasy is having a lot of that detail, but then still having a lot of action, having a driving narrative. So it really is a skill to unfold information. So these books tend to be big, Aldemir's Dilemma is even bigger than the Jester Knight as far as number of pages. Jester Knight is 404, and I think that Aldemir's Dilemma is pushing 500. If you're fans of J.R.R. Tolkien, you know those are J.R.R. Tolkien. Some of them, The Silmarillion's a big book for sure, but George R.R. Martin, those books are big. I didn't have Patrick Rothfuss on here. Whisper in the Wind, I believe it's called. Something about the wind, and I'm sorry that I'm blanking today. It's been a while since I read it, but that's a big, big book, and so many of them are. So you have the opportunity. Your readers are willing to invest. This isn't a quick, breezy, disposable New York Times bestseller, couple hundred pages on the beach, go right through it kind of thing. Fantasy is an investment, and the reader knows that, which is wonderful. So again, detail plus action. So read and watch the very best and deconstruct them. I shared with you The Hobbit, which I bought around the same time that I started playing D&D in 1980, but I'll get to that in a little bit. Fantasy, again, also has these great layers of allegory, of metaphor. It's wonderful, wonderful stuff. It takes some work to get it right, which is great. It keeps us honest. It keeps us moving. And it's also a dance of the macro and the micro, very much like life. So if fantasy has this spiritual, religious element, as above, so below, definitely works. What's going on the large, large scale is also going on for the individual characters. And that movement back and forth, that dance of the macro and micro, that's the intimate and the universal. It's the individual and the community. Again, Lord of the Rings is so beautiful. The interrelationship between the individual and the community, the individual who does what's best for the community, the individual through their ambition, through their evil, through their mental illness, of greed and so on and so forth, and wanting too much power, would willingly destroy the community or distorts the community or tries to take disparate what is empire, but one individual who has a vision, Alexander, Napoleon, so on and so forth, who wants to take disparate communities, individual communities, and mush them all together, destroy their individual personalities, and turn it into a big, the Pax Romana. So you think of the Roman conquest, bring it all together, get it into focus, give the people just enough that's recognizable to keep them calm. So again, fantasy is just, life is there. It's there in all of the fantastic. And to me, that's really the dance. How do you keep it grounded while also keeping it fantastical? Now, with any kind of genre, and certainly for me, I know this is key. And again, Lord of the Rings, I talked to Sam Gamgee is my favorite character in anything that Tolkien has written. Sam, it just speaks to me so clearly. And of course, Sam loves story. He loves the value of story. So that might not be surprising. But Rob Lowe's character, and I said this to Richard Haddam when he was on this show several weeks ago, says in Salem's Lot, Stephen King's book, complex characters elevate genre. And this is true. Does Stephen King do character great? I think he does plot better than he does character. There aren't characters in his books that, to me, are so memorable because they're complex. A lot of them, so I'm reading the Dark Tower series. Many of you know that because I've been talking about it as I've been going. Roland is kind of immovable. He doesn't change a lot at all. That's not so much the point, I don't think, for King. He's very genre, he's very plot, he's very intricate in a lot of ways, and brilliant in a lot of ways. So interesting that his character says that. And Stephen King wrote Eyes of the Dragon, which is his fantasy novel. If you don't know a lot about Stephen King, yes, he does horror, but he's done Sherlock Holmes and he's done fantasy. He's woven everything from The Wizard of Oz to The Magnificent Seven, almost beat for beat in The Dark Tower. So he's played with a lot of different kinds of genre. So you want your characters to be real. You want them to be memorable. You want them to be somebody you take the journey with. So if we think of Star Wars, Luke is that kind of character we want to take the journey with. Dorothy, Wizard of Oz is certainly a high fantasy piece. We want to take the journey with her. We find ourselves rooting for her. Then there are meta journeys. So these big journeys that are the individuals coming together to support each other, prop each other up. Again, Lord of the Rings, we have the Nine Walkers in the Fellowship of the Ring. We have alliances which are often very fluid, which I love in Game of Thrones. These meta journeys or macro journeys really enhance the micro journeys. As above, so below. They work like holograms. The micro journeys are like fractals, and they all come together in this beautiful hologram that matches up with the theme. And of course, we need to assemble our teams. I don't have that here in the notes, but the Nine Walkers is basically that device in writing of assembling your team. So there you go. And the macro journey, the micro journey working together are the exterior and the interior journeys, right? Like I said, physical and psychological together, that the traditional hero undertakes. So this expression of the Nine Walkers is really what's going on with any of those individual characters. Is wonderful. Like I said, fractals and holograms to me is what it really is, because action is character. Another thing that I love is we have the Boromirs who failed the test. We have Gollum who failed to keep enough distance from the ring that it didn't own him. So we have these characters. We have the king who's been overtaken with madness, which is very Grail Quest Fisher Ring. So the kingdom is in disrepair because the king is in disrepair. The landscape is physically decrepit because the king is psychologically decrepit. Wonderful Grima Wormtongue, one of the great villains, and in Aldemir's Dilemma, which carries over to book 3, which is, I've actually written tens of thousands of words for book 3, but just haven't gotten a chance to get back to it. I have a character, Calrain the Small, who's kind of a Grima Wormtongue, but also redeemable and a good character in a lot of ways in the end. But that's just a wonderful, what a character. So anyway, all of the other characters illuminate the aspects of the hero. And that really goes back. Watch my show on character and theme, the character continuum. Fantasy, of course, has a much longer continuum. Game of Thrones has so many characters, hundreds of characters. That character continuum is so interesting. We talked about too, if you're interested in how that character continuum manifests. Last week I had Penn Densham back on the show, and he was talking about Robin Hood and the expressions of what he was trying to do with that character and the characters that he surrounded Robin Hood with. I had to point out to him that was such a beautiful example of how the character continuum really works. A main driving theme of fantasy is power politics, right? Game of Thrones. It's right there, power politics. And man, we are living in a world of power politics, of scheming. Yeah, I don't know. The United States is full of Grima Wormtongues right now, and possibly has a decrepit king, not unlike in the Lord of the Rings stories. But anyway, so these themes, these power politics, are not just politics the way we think of politics. Sexual power is all over the place in this stuff, especially again in Game of Thrones, definitely in Vikings, The Last Kingdom. Any show or anything you read about the Vikings, you're going to have a lot of sexual power politics, because that's really the history of all of the families of Europe. I talk about it so much in my pirate work, but I'm also reading a great book right now about the royal family in England, going all the way back to Elizabeth I to modern times and their relationship with the intelligence community. So, of course, World War I, part of the reason why it was so incredibly complicated was Nicholas and the Kaiser and George in England were all cousins. Nicholas and George looked like twins practically. They had the same type of facial hair and everything. Nicholas's wife was German. Don't forget too that before the English strategically changed their name from Hanover to Windsor, as things got very ugly with World War II, they were also from German descent, going all the way back to George the first in the early 1700s, which I talk about in the pirate stuff all the time. So this power politics, familial politics, sexual politics, who marries who, those kinds of alliances, they're really all over the place in fantasy, and they make it very fun, but they also teach us a lot as well. Fantasy is a place, and I suppose in all genre it's true, but fantasy is no exception, clearly demarcated good and evil. Again, this is also a double-edged sword, because life is much more complicated than that. Characters are much more complicated than that. Political alliances are much more complicated than that. But for our purposes, it's good to have that demarcation of good and evil. But the fun really comes in that, like in D&D, and that's why I wore my t-shirt today, OG Dungeon Master, rolling the 20 since 1980. Basically, all of those scenes in the basement in the early seasons and the very last season of Stranger Things, that was me and my friends in middle school. I created characters who are in my fantasy novels now, being the dungeon master and creating my own modules with graph paper and all that kind of thing, really led me to not only being a writer, but specifically, of course, being a writer of fantasy. But like in D&D, the real fun comes in with characters who are fluid, characters who are fun. Han Solo in Star Wars, which I talked about, who's like true or, well, he's true neutral to me. But you have your chaotic evil characters who are a lot of fun in fantasy, and I'm trying to create some of those in my own. So again, D&D. That's where I got started. It means so much to me. It's so cool that D&D is still alive, both in physical 3D world and online. I've done both. I still like the physical 3D, hold the stuff in your hands, have the books set up. That's a great scene, right, where Eddie is doing the quest. Is wonderful. That means so much to me, and I have pictures of him doing that because that's the storyteller. That's the life that I chose. That's the world. Another thing that you really need to do to make all of this come together, and I showed you those 4 thick binders. It's about 5 inches worth of binder material just for these worlds, is you must love research. The more you can put in history, bend and shape history to your own purposes, use it as an analog, the more real and familiar it's going to seem to your audience. This box of index cards here, I've been putting this together for decades. But these are all individual note cards. What are some of the subjects here? Landscape, castles and fortifications and architecture, armor, weaponry and flags, shipbuilding and sailing, horses and cavalry, military strategy and structure, funerals and burials, culture, music, and definitions of appropriate words that you would find in fantasy. I'm not even sure what that is. So anyhow, that's quite a stack there. For those listening on the radio, that's about 4 or 5 inches of index cards there, all with small lines with everything done. So that's those binders, that's pictures and all kinds of things that I have. What are some of the other things that you can do to make this research fun? Books, documentaries. I was checking out books and VHA tapes out of the library as I was trying to work on Jester Knight, and that was the only book I was working on at the time. That goes back about 35 years ago, and I've watched hours and hours and hours of documentaries to try to help me with this stuff, always taking notes. Online documentaries that you can watch, YouTube channels, things like that, presentations. There are some wonderful channels that are out there where people are building medieval castles, or how did they make bread in the Middle Ages, or what was going on here, or what were the diseases like. And they're wonderful on History Channel and PBS, and so you can definitely find those things. They're wonderful. The hosts are so passionate all the time, which is wonderful. There are video games. You can study the video games, look at things like that. I collect and paint miniatures. I know a lot of gamers, of course, do. I don't know if other writers do, but I will just they don't show up great here, but I just have dozens of these, and I picked 7 here. Um, and I'm going quickly. These are actually I chose them specifically because they're characters that are in my book. So it's wonderful to have them sitting there while I'm writing, to actually look at them, what they look like, what their costumes are, and all of that. Yeah. So, and I have on that shelf, I don't know. There's dozens of them, and then there on the bottom are unopened boxes of things that I haven't been able to get to yet. Um, this little guy I got in a little shop in Newport, Rhode Island, over 20 years ago, and this to me is quintessentially my amber dragon, which is the overarching name for this series. So, book 1 of the Amber Dragon Tales, hopefully of 7 if I live long enough to do that. Um, let's see, collect maps, pictures of landscapes. I showed you that in the binder. Renaissance festivals are a really, really awesome source. We used to go when the kids were young. We used to go to a lot of Renaissance festivals. Then I wound up doing historical reenacting with the pirates. Wound up, if they allowed enough to actually perform at some Renaissance festivals, and that's wonderful. There are people who are very knowledgeable. You can look at the costumes, you can see how things are cooked, how they're made, leather work, all of that. It's very wonderful. You can smell, taste, and hear and feel all of those things. So if you're serious about writing fantasy, definitely treat yourself this summer to some Renaissance fairs. You definitely won't regret it. So, creating entire worlds, man, that could be daunting, but those of us who love it absolutely love it. I showed you the maps, all of those different kinds of things I do. I'll put those up again there. Creating entire worlds, so that is my world there. On the map that I showed you has a lot more detail than what's in the book. Some things I did not want to give away because they don't come until they don't come into play until later. But the details of what exactly does the castle look like? People spend so much time in there. At one point in Jester Night, the castle is under siege, so I need to know what that looks like. And I have maps of the larger thing. Again, this Temple of the Seers, everything that's in the temple is so coded. It's so an expression of their religion and their rituals that I needed to visually have that and work it out. You also need to be consistent. Same thing, all the ritual that goes on in this boat shape, the vessel of the Ruinae. Um, so, so there you go. So lots and lots of research, creating entire worlds. There's a responsibility that comes with this because there's so much politics, so much religion, sexual politics are all so much of this, and all genres have them to a greater or lesser degree. We oftentimes have quite a bit of this in the Western genre, which I'll talk with RG about next week. But you really have a responsibility. So I'm creating an entire religions. Races are going to war in my books over religion, differences in religion, monotheistic religions, polytheistic religions, water-based religions, land-based religions. It's interesting to me how a race manifests their religion, their spiritual belief system, their pantheon of gods by their daily life. So the seagoing people, everything has to do with water, wind, and wood, the 3 W's, water, wind, and wood, because that's their entire life. So I love the challenge of that and bringing that all together. Again, do a character continuum, find out what characters you need to best reflect the hero and the hero's journey. Tolkien did such a masterful job of that. He truly did. World building for the reader and viewer. Start small. It's the same thing if you're into long form narrative, aka TV shows or the streaming shows that are now 8 to 10 episodes. You will notice that they start small and they slowly expand out. They drop little plants. They write IOUs to you. and good writers will see those IOUs paid. You will see that, oh, that's what that was, 8 episodes ago. That's what that was 2 seasons ago. They'll bring in more characters. They'll let some characters go. There's an entire huge world, as you can see, all these different countries, all these different territories in Glitter Eye. The first book only focuses on that main piece of land there. It doesn't really say much about some of the other things. It does go toward the end into some of the islands. Uh, Metlik is the dwarves where they live. Eret is where the seagoing people live in the southern part. So the kingdom of Glitter Eye is in the north part. In the southern part, that's where the elves live on the other side of those rivers. And so the elves, who have a very different political theological system than the humans, they live in this uneasy tension. If that sounds familiar, yeah, J.R.R. Tolkien did that. It's in the largest lore. It's in our fairy tales. It's everywhere. So I'm going to talk about how you can overcome that when you're doing those other kinds of things. Stealing or just being replicating or wasting people's time by not doing anything new. We're going to get to that very soon. Rules of governance, economic structures. Make sure you're consistent. Take good notes. Have characters who express those things in ways. Think of The Big Short, Margot Robbie in the bathtub with a glass of champagne talking about mortgage packaging. Have characters who can deliver the information that you need in an interesting way is the best thing there that you can do. Define your conventions. Is this a magical world? If so, how does it operate? Don't do your magic just willy-nilly. Don't use it to resurrect characters over and over. I loved the show Supernatural, but they abused the fact that characters could come over and over and over again, and even when they were dead, they weren't really dead, and they could show up in different forms or in parallel universes, or it can make you lazy, and it makes, when you have to kill a character, and I try to kill off a major character in every book in this series, you want it to mean something. So that means they're never coming back. That's important. I stopped watching Walking Dead shortly after Glenn wasn't really dead. It was between that and the Negan scene with the baseball bat was just so incredibly brutal, and the way they did it was, I thought, was a little gratuitous. So anyway, that's another form of fantasy that sort of crosses the line between fantasy and horror in some ways. Speaking of that, so as your world gets more solid and familiar, Tanya and I are watching Grimm right now. Richard Haddam was on the show several weeks ago, and so we watched Grimm because he worked on it for the first 2 seasons. They did such a great job of world building and chose such a fantastical world, the world of the Grimms and monsters, demons, all these different kinds of things, that no matter what happens, it fits. You can buy it. It belongs in that world. And they have a lot of credit for that, for slowly building over time. We're at the last third of the 4th season now. So we watched almost 100 episodes. We're getting close to 100 episodes now. They did a wonderful job of that world building, and it really was terrific. Who is your audience and what do they want? That's the question that we always have to ask. And in fantasy, they have very, very specific expectations. Now, you can try to buck them if you want, but do that at your own peril. It makes no sense to me to go into a genre and just subvert all of the expectations for the genre. Great to subvert elements, great to use genre as metaphor for something socio-political, like Jordan Peele does with his films. I think that's wonderful. But just going in to just blow open and subvert every expectation of a genre is no fun at all, and your audience is not going to love you for it. So know why when you go into a genre. We're going to talk to RG Yoho. I love Westerns. I always have a Western on my nightstand. It's one of the ways that I prefer to fall asleep at night, is reading a Western. And I have certain expectations of those. Great if they bring in something new and they surprise me. That's wonderful. In my Sherlock Holmes book, I did a Gothic Western as the backstory. And that was really fun to put horror elements into Western. I even like cowboys and aliens. It works because the cowboy tropes are solid enough and the UFO alien tropes are solid enough that they go together. Jim Jarmusch is great about deconstructing and reconstructing genre, bringing something new to it. His film Ghost Dog, which is mafia movies meets gangsta movies, is wonderful. So that's what I want to say about that. Why do people love it? Know why they love it and make sure you have plenty of it. Why did the myths of Camelot, Arthur, the Grail quests endure? I'm going to make that a rhetorical question. I'm not going to answer it for you because it'll mean different things to you. But those, the Arthurian legends, Camelot, of course, which is connected, intricate, the Grail quest, that is all well within there. Our fairy tales, our myths, the Grimm brothers, very much. A lot of our archetypal stories come out of that. And they were working from either even older archetypes in the oral tradition, and what was real and what wasn't real, and how did they come in, and what were they metaphors or allegories for? Those are wonderful questions. So what is it about the romance of the times of castles and knights that people love? Because there's a lot. If you watch those documentaries on PBS and on the History Channel, you will see this is not a great time to be alive. Life expectancy was low. Food was hard to come by. Disease was rampant, so on and so forth. It was violent. It was feudal. So why do we romanticize that period? Is it all just the knights? Back behind me there is my Templar sword and my Templar helmet. The Templars, that's highly romanticized. I'm reading some, they were New York Times bestsellers, but they're basically pretty disposable stuff. I'm a sucker for a good Templar story in modern times. Super tropey, speaking of tropes. But anyway, there you go. What is it about the quest and the hero's journey that's so universal and compelling? That's much easier to answer, and arguably the core of my entire life work as a storyteller, story teacher, story technician. I have this in bold here, and I meant to say, and I should have said, I like to give credit where credit is due. This what I'm doing today is based on a workshop that I first was asked to present at the West Virginia Writers Conference in 2014, which is where I met R.G. Yoho, by the way, and also did it as a 2022 article for Stage 32. So I just wanted to go ahead and mention that. Bring something new or don't bother. There's nothing that I like. Cover bands are cover bands. They're in bars and they're there as background, hyper familiarity. You're not there to watch the band. They're really like a live jukebox while you're getting drunk, dancing, trying to hook up, so on and so forth, whatever goes on at bars. It's like a cover of a classic song that sounds exactly like the original. So when I wanted to write, when I got really serious about taking what was really a bunch of poems, and I write so much of the Amber Dragon Tales first as poems, which are sometimes closer to prose outlines, and sometimes they are very much poems, but for the archetypal characters in the stories. So how do we do this? How do we bring something new? That was very important to me as I went. Find a new point of view. It could be simple as that. Find an underrepresented archetype in the fantasy genre to be your lead character. It's a great thing to do. They're doing that more and more in video games. Find a character who isn't your typical white, straight male hero and write your story about that. That could be enough right there. Come up with a new race like I did with the Areti. They're like our Vikings, but there isn't, in all of the fantasy that I've read, and I've read a good bit, there isn't anything quite like them. And that was appealing to me, and that's why I wanted to do that. A new type of monster, or take a familiar monster, but provide a new background or origin story. Why does a dragon have scales and wings? So on and so forth, which sounds like a Just So story from Rudyard Kipling, but it can be that, but bring something. Change the stakes. Instead of a physical treasure, make it a psychological one. Make it an emotional one. Instead of everyone being at war all the time, very appealing and somewhat expected in the fantasy genre, but instead of everyone being at war all the time, examine the challenges that come with long-standing enemies navigating an uneasy, fragile peace. That is built into, while there's larger forces going on, in Jester Knight, where it's really a battle from within, whereas by the time we get to Aldemir's Dilemma, it's a battle without its exterior. It's a foreign country. What goes on in Jester Knight happens within the country itself, which is very compelling to me. I'm very, very interested in revolution, the mechanisms of revolution, how family hierarchy plays into that, how lineage, right of ascension, so the oldest son automatically becomes the baron or the duke or the king, or how does that work? So you can do that. But within all of that war, I told you about the elves and the humans that I have who are separated by the river. They have an uneasy peace and a lot of mistrust, and they need to align together against these larger forces. Can they do it? So that's something to consider. For me, the big thing was the jester hyphen knight. A jester has a very physical, very comedic skill set. A knight has a very physical, very serious, very technical, very deadly, very violent skill set. To me, that was the two sides of the brain, and quite frankly, it was me, what I call my Joseph and my Joey. One very, very given to duty. The other one given to more of a physical, comedic, trickster kind of freedom. And what does it mean when my character, that's where the Klosmer, the Jester Knight, take two things, again, that dyad, and bring them to something new. So that's what I did. That's what I needed to do in order to produce anything in the fantasy genre. So it's fantastical fantasy, it's inspiration illusion, but it definitely can be real. Work things out, set mechanisms for yourself, set parameters. When I was trying to place Jester Knight with agents in New York and LA, Chicago, so on and so forth, part of the way that I was trying to sell it was to say that Aldemir, like he is on the cover here, could fight a two-headed dragon with a sword, shield, and lance on horseback on a ledge of a mountain. So I worked it out in different ways. One of the opening scenes from Aldemir's Dilemma goes back to an experience I had in college in the woods in Pennsylvania, and during a rainstorm where the river was flooding unexpectedly, but someone had buried something there and we were going to retrieve it and hadn't checked the weather right. So the more that you can do that, again, the Renaissance fair is wonderful. Would I love to get on a horse, put on a full suit of armor, and joust so that I knew more what that was like for my characters? Yeah, but I just don't know if that's in the cards for me ever. I don't use a lot of magic in my stories. There are some magical elements. I do have a race of people that I introduce in Aldemir's Dilemma that are called the Gray Bear. Weirdly enough, they have lion heads, but sort of bear bodies, but they're called the Gray Bear, Baer. And they use magic, but they use a forest magic, more of a natural magic and alchemical magic. The same with the elves in my stories. Here's the thing where I don't like magic. It can make creators lazy. It can introduce Deus Ex Machina. If you don't know that term, that comes from the Greek theater, where literally a character was brought down in a machine, a platform, to say, oh no, it's all done and you're all forgiven and I'm a god, and that one that was dead comes back to life. And that's a Deus Ex Machina. You got to use that with care. Use your magic with care. Where it really becomes a mess is when there is no rule, there is no consistency, the conventions are not stated, and then that can just magically, again, I'll take credit for the pun, magically get an author out of a scrape, and I don't care for that. It should be inherent in the world, in the fabric of the world, expressed in the story to move your story forward in a legitimate way, in an organic way, not in a false way. So All that to say, and I have it written in all caps, don't cheat. Because what really makes the fantasy genre really work is that it is about characters in struggle on a path of growth. If you take the struggle away from them, they don't grow. The path gets shorter, the characters are shortchanged, the story shortchanged, and the audience is shortchanged. So don't cheat. And I want to end, of course, with Frodo Baggins, right? Because this is a simple guy with a straightforward task to drop a ring in the top of a fiery mountain, or everything he knows and loves will end. What a great pitch. What a great log line. Frodo Baggins is a simple guy with a straightforward task. Drop a ring in the top of a fiery mountain, or everything he knows and loves will end. Again, that is the total genius of Tolkien. Now, how Frodo gets there, the people and creatures he encounters, the obstacles he faces, the inner crises he must overcome, the new places he sees, and different cultural customs he learns, that is what makes Tolkien's story a true masterpiece. So I didn't want to put them on Facebook and I didn't want to put them on LinkedIn. I apologize for that, but they get a little dicey about putting links to external stuff on their platforms. I had an entire page taken down where it was links to my book reviews, and that's what I would post. And I'm like, no, you can't be sending people out of our platform all the time, so we're shutting down your page. Well, that actually they deleted all the content, so I shut down the page. So, but on my YouTube, in the show description, I have links to my blog, Joey Medea Storyteller. The outline for this presentation is there if you want to grab that or read it again. I have a list of fun fantasy films and TV series to watch, must-read fantasy series and books, the Arthurian romances on the page and the screen, Grail Quest, Cathars, and Templars, and Vikings in fact and fiction. So that could be a good starter kit for your own research if you want to write fantasy or if you want to up your fantasy game. So next week, I already told you, Western writers coming on. Then we're going to be away, so I'll repost an episode, probably something from fairly recently that Facebook has taken down that I really want to be back up. So that means probably Josh Stout, the painter, will probably go back up on Facebook while I'm away. And then we come back, I have a couple of visual artists who are going to be on. I'm going to do a short story 101, also based on a workshop that I've taught for a lot of years, and was talking to somebody recently who wanted to write short story. And I said, hey, let me send you my workshop outline. And I was like, might as well do an episode on this. So a lot of the summer I'm going to be touring, so there will be good replays to put up for you so that you can have them. I'm working on a film producer. I just got their new book. It's not even out yet. They're going to be on the show in August, and we'll just keep on going. I still want to have Tanya on to talk about her wonderful Route 66 encrypted art. So hopefully that's going to happen in the fall, and we'll just keep on going. So thank you who joined me live. I know that can, hey, Julie, how you doing? I know it can be tough in the afternoon. Most people, even when it's on at 7 at night, the vast majority of them watch this on replay, so that's great. Again, you can catch it on ERT Radio in 3 weeks or so. So thank you all. Got it all done in 57.5 minutes, and we are out. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.